Welcome into the A-List podcast. I'm Kwani A. Lunis, joined with Sherrod Blakely as always. How you doing today, Sherrod?
I'm doing wonderful. And I'm so excited about our guest because last time we had this young fellow on, we had some technical difficulties. And you know what? We're probably going to have some more technical difficulties now. So I'm going to blame you. I'm going to blame him. I'm going to blame anyone because I'm all about blaming anyone and everyone else except me because I'm blameless, obviously.
Always.
I'm excited about this podcast. I mean, we're obviously going to be talking about the NBA Finals, and we're going to have Sam Amick of The Athletic, who is literally on the run as we speak
in
Phoenix. Exactly. So we'll talk.
This is live in the field.
Yes. This is going to be so real time, like you haven't seen real time in our podcast existence. But we'll obviously get into the NBA Finals and just, you're looking at Phoenix, you're looking at Milwaukee, Giannis, questionable, not just for game one, but just for the series for that matter. What's your take on this Finals matchup? How are you looking at it?
Well, for one, I think it's a very interesting matchup. The fact that none of us could have predicted the two teams that would make it to the final showdown, so to speak. The fact that Giannis has been upgraded to the point where he might play makes the series more interesting because we don't want to watch this series without having the best of the best go up against each other and really make it a fair matchup.
Yeah, that's what you want to see. But I really give both of these teams a lot of credit because they have had injuries in the postseason and have been finding ways to just navigate through that and keep their seasons alive. I love what this Phoenix team is doing. I love the fact that you've got Chris Paul seeking that first chip.
Finally.
And low key, there's a certain Boston Celtics flavor to that Phoenix Suns team. When you talk about Abdul Nader, you talk about good friend Jay Crowder. It seems like Jay Crowder, winning is wherever he's at, he's winning. So there's a lot of intrigue with this team and that Milwaukee Bucks team. You look at how they've been able to progress to where they're at. They were very close to potentially having a possible coaching change, but didn't get it done this year and get them this far. So that team is certainly one to watch out for. And obviously for us, I want to hear more about this matchup. And I think we've got our buddy Sam is ready to roll now, I believe. This is live and direct from Phoenix. He's literally in Phoenix as we speak. Heading over to the game and things like that. Well, obviously we had some crazy technical difficulties last time you were on, Sam, but this is even better. So obviously
I'm
it's
a
about
high maintenance guest. I need to clean my act up here. I'm sorry.
Sherrod's blaming me and you for the technical difficulties.
Absolutely.
Blame on himself.
That's the kind of teammate you are, Sherrod. Come on, man.
Exactly. Well, speaking of teammates, you look at the teammates involved in this playoffs, the final series with the Suns and with the Bucks. Sam, what's your just general take on this matchup and just how this thing is going to play out the way you see it?
I think it could be really good. Obviously, as we sit here in real time, getting closer to game one, you've got the Giannis, question front and center. Not only is he going to play, but we were talking about it last night with some of our media friends over dinner, that idea that it's one thing if somebody gets back on the floor. We've seen with Chris Paul and guys like that, even Donovan Mitchell, if you're not right and you're trying to get, the NBA play alone, the finals is a pretty tough place to do that. You know what I mean? So Giannis, if he was back tonight, that doesn't mean it's the two-time MVP. It's a guy who pushed to play. So independent of that, I think it could be a really long series. I feel like you have these two teams that at their best are some of the best in the league, but they're both wildly inconsistent. A lot of the role players, Chris Middleton, Devin Booker, all the way down the line, they're not the type of kind of, last year we're looking at LeBron and the Lakers, pretty consistent all the way through. Before that, the Warriors and the Cavs and the level of play that they would give you in the postseason was pretty consistent. I think more kind of variance with these two squads, and because of that, maybe a very long, interesting up and down series.
Yeah, go ahead, Kwani.
With Giannis' status still up in the air, do you think Milwaukee has a shot at this series without him?
I do. It's weird. I like, Kwani, the fact that Giannis is Giannis. He's fantastic. But when he's out, in a weird way, it's kind of like some of those superpowers for the other guys, get elevated. Chris Middleton led the way late in the last series. Jrue Holiday, who when they picked him up last offseason, I love that fit. two-way player, long, culture guy, all those things. But how many times did you watch the Bucks when Giannis was on the floor and just kind of wish that Jrue gave you a little more? Like him doing what he does best in the context of that group has not always been, him at his best. And so that's a long answer to the question. I do think they could catch these Suns for 1-2 games without Giannis if they didn't have him. I think they do have that capability.
Yeah, the weird thing about that is that when I think about Jrue Holiday, who I think he's one of the most underappreciated players in the NBA when you look at his ability to play both ends of the floor. But when I watch him play, him and Giannis, and I don't understand why this is, there isn't a natural fit with those two guys, even though I would think that what Drew's capable of doing, when we've seen him do it, before he got to Milwaukee, and we know what Giannis can do, I would have thought that their pairing would have been a little bit smoother, a little bit more crisp, and it just hasn't been that way. To me, the saving grace for that team has been Chris Middleton, who really is like a number 2 guy on your roster who has played like a 1B for a lot of the postseason.
100%. I mean, the Jrue thing it's funny. I want to keep learning more about the internal dynamics with the Bucks because you hear stuff from time to time that a lot of it is Giannis and the way he wants to play, that he wants the ball in his hands and he wants to be part of pick and roll. And that's why that, Jrue doesn't necessarily get to do his thing until Giannis is off the floor. And that has been the push and pull with Mike Budenholzer. And I think at times, he's been subject to some fair criticism about his, inability to send that message to Giannis that, hey, let's tweak this, tweak that to get more out of Jrue and put you in the best spot to be at your best. But it's been a tough fit, but you can't kill them too much. They're in the finals. They made it through during this kind of injury-ravaged postseason, and here they are.
Yeah, they're in the finals, and that's a good thing for them. For fans, I'm not sure about that. And Sam, we all of us have been around the NBA long enough to know that this time of year you get this sweltering of the casual basketball fan because that's just what happens when the NBA Finals rolls around, and we've gotten used to being casually entertained by LeBron and whoever the heck he's dragging to the finals that year. There's no LeBron. You don't have your typical – you don't have a Kawhi Leonard. You don't have the guys that we're accustomed to seeing this time of year. And we've got two teams that aren't traditionally in the conversation for the last team standing the way these guys are. How do you think this is going to play out with your casual fan? And if you had to convince the casual fan why they should pay attention to this finals, what's your selling pitch?
Man, you my Tim Frank out here? What's the job?
Exactly. I'm trying to create some multiple streams of income here for you.
I like it. Head of NBA PR right here. I mean, listen, Giannis is already a global superstar, so I don't think you have to sell people on him. Love him. I mean, hopefully folks don't hate him. He's a hell of a player. He's got his imperfections. But Giannis, people know if you're selling it, I'd be looking at Mr. Booker. I mean, to me, Devin Booker is a guy that it's just if you enjoy the game, how do you not enjoy what he does? And I love the narrative or kind of the subplot of, not to go too far back in the history books, but, 2011, Chris Paul thinks he's headed to the Lakers in a trade to play with his buddy Kobe Bryant, right? And it's one of the great what-ifs of NBA lore. And I just love the idea that all these years later, you got a young guy in Devin Booker who became fairly close with Kobe before he passed, has a tattoo on his arm that says, "Be legendary," that was inspired by something that Kobe told him. And then now you have a very similar, backcourt stylistically to the one that we never got to see between Chris Paul. And that pairing is a lot of fun, even not only in his talents, but the world in the mainstream audience is getting to see his wiring and his mentality. I mean, the other day, media day, he talks about, coming close to throwing hands with Chris early on in their time together in Phoenix and the way they would battle in the post. And he's a dog and the kind of guy that, all across the league, you guys know this. So, young stars in small markets. Now, Phoenix is not as small as people think, but it's not New York. It's not LA. But, these guys get frustrated after a couple of years and they're looking for a place to go get to this level. Devin basically said, I'm going to stick it out. I'm going to sign the extension and I'm going to get people to come with me. And Chris ultimately was that guy. DeAndre Ayton, obviously, homegrown and doing good things. So Devin to me is the guy that is going to have the spotlight, and I think make the most of it.
The thing I love about Devin is that when you're that young and you're that talented, people assume that you're going to just, frankly, let your talent carry you. But he's got a level of toughness that I did not anticipate seeing. I mean, getting in the Joker's face, not just getting in the Joker's face, but in the back of your mind, knowing the people that the Joker rolls with, his family. Let's be honest, that is not the dude that you're going to roll up on. He is not that dude. And yet Devin Booker is in his grill. And then, speaking of grill, Devin gets his nose busted open. Yeah. And he's still balling.
Yeah.
Much respect. The Celtics have your coach.
Yeah.
Kwani, finish my sentence. That's how we're sick like that. Finish my sentence.
So Ime Udoka, who I'm sure you're familiar with, is now the new Celtics head coach. You were covering, I think, the Sacramento Kings around the time when he was there. What do you remember about him?
He's just one of the kind of realest guys that I've covered. I remember running into Ime years and years later, after his playing career at the Staples Center. And I forget at that point exactly what he was doing. But if I'm being honest, being flattered by the level of kindness that he showed all those years later and how he remembered me and I wanted to know how I was doing. And so we kind of reconnected then. I've kept in touch. And I love his coaching story. He's a role player during his playing career, right? And we've seen that can a lot of times lead to very good coaching. These guys had to learn how to navigate their way through a locker room and deal with superstars, but then inspire, the guys at the end of the bench too and be that connective tissue. And with Ime, his level of focus as a player and kind of making the most of the talent he had is something that I think is going to translate to getting the most out of his players. And his coaching story, and I know a lot of stories are being written about him right now. The part that doesn't get highlighted that much that I love is that he was playing overseas, post NBA, still making money internationally, and he gets a call from the one and only, essentially gets that first offer to be an assistant coach in the NBA, and he had the wherewithal and the wisdom to basically know you don't say no to Pop, and if you want to be a coach, you need to go kind of learn. So did that, and I'm happy for him to see it pay off. I think he's a good fit with the Celtics. And the Team USA component, as you guys know, is I think an X factor here is his ability to establish relationships with guys like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and get these guys respect. But he's not one. You guys have seen there are coaches who they establish the relationships with some of the stars, but you have that vibe of like, man, they're kind of really hustling to get that connection in order to advance their own career, as opposed to a more genuine thing where Ime, I really think, has in small ways helped all these different guys, and they kind of just have all decided they support him, and I think he'll be a really good fit.
And the thing about Sam, for those who don't realize, you're going to hear a lot of folks say lots of positive things about Udoka as a head coach today. But Sam, and we're going to pull it up in a minute now, Sam called it back in 2016 that Udoka is someone that we need to be looking out for as a head coach. And when I pulled that tweet out of the Sam Amick, vault, I was like, man, I got to bring this up to him. Do you remember just what was it in that moment? Because obviously at that point, he hadn't really done a ton from an assistant coaching standpoint. But there was something that you must have saw or you sensed in him that made you put that tweet out. What do you remember about him before, he kind of got enthralled in a Popovich, program that made you think that he would be someone that could be a pretty good head coach one day?
First of all, Sherrod, thanks for bringing that up. I don't get much right. I don't even remember tweeting that, so I take your word for it.
2016, baby.
Stamp
nice.
it.
I like it. I mean, it's probably, that part of his story that I already knew at that time was impressive. And then, I remember he was real tight with LaMarcus Aldridge from their time in Portland together. And I remember being a little bit struck by Aldridge's attitude towards Ime, where it was like, oh, this is not just like, yeah, he's pretty good with this coach. Like, it was almost as if Pop during that chapter really needed Ime to get to LaMarcus. And that got my attention. I also think there were playoff runs where, and this is, I think, fine enough to share, where I remember like telling Ime, like, hey, we should connect for a beer after the game or something like that. And this is just a side story, but I remember laughing about the fact that I was like, hey, we're over at the Skirvin. Charles Barkley's buying everybody rounds. Come say hello.
That's the best top part about the playoffs when Charles is buying drinks. Right. Love that.
Well, but I learned, and I believe I'm accurate in saying this, that I believe Ime is a teetotaler. He's not the kind of guy you're going to find at the bar. And there was a level of focus where it was like, absolutely, Sam, we can have, 27 minutes to go get coffee. And then I got to go back and break down tape, and very, very serious of the job and he focused. Wow. And not in a like, you guys, there's some coaches where that stuff gets kind of glamorized, the guy who shows up at 4 a.m. and then you find out that it's all exaggerated, but he's just very determined and has been to get to that next level as a head coach, and obviously finally got there.
Wow. Well, one of the and you touched on this a little bit earlier. One of the folks that he's going to be working with is Jason Tatum, who, it's not bad player.
Got potential.
He's got exactly. The thing about Tatum, he's starting to really become more and more of a talking point when you're talking about the best of the best in the NBA. I mean, do you see him at this point being in that top tier, or is he maybe a rung or two below that upper echelon of players in the league? Where do you see him fitting in right now?
It's hard because normally you got a perennial conference finals participant, and I think the Celtics get, I don't know what it's because of the franchise's history, that mentality of all or nothing, maybe getting to the conference finals gets glossed over, but, he's checked that box. He's taken his team pretty far several times. But if I'm being honest, I mean, he's a top tier star, but he's not, he's not on a LeBron level. He's not, I mean, now I don't even know where to put guys anymore. Jokic had an incredible year. I voted for him MVP, but Kawhi for a minute was the guy we were calling the best two-way player in the game, and that's it for me. Just Tatum's amazing, but Celtics and Brad Stevens now running that front office. What are they going to put around him to get back to that next level?
Mm-hmm. And speaking of getting to the next level, Marcus Smart, good player, love Marcus Smart, coming up on a contract year. Curious, do you think other teams love Marcus Smart as much as the Celtics have up to this point? Is he someone that you could see being in play? And if so, do you see certain fits that might be better for him than others?
Yeah, I think his market's going to be good. For one, he's one of those guys that we might forget that because he's been doing it at a pretty high level for several years. I feel like everybody acts like he's 32 or 33. He's not. He's in his prime.
Yeah.
And his intensity and his competitiveness and what he does on the defensive end and obviously can be a streaky offensive player. I think his market trade-wise is going to be robust and has been okay to this point. The Celtics fit, and you guys certainly would know a lot better than me. You continually hear, that noise about, they have loved him, but, it's kind of like that coach who, this is probably a bad parallel, but Tom Thibodeau wears on teams pretty quickly, right? So if you're chirping and you're grinding hard in the locker room, and we've seen these flare-ups with Marcus and the guys, who, to his credit, he's walked this line of he does genuinely seem real close with the guys in the locker room, but I think in that same breath they would admit that there are just days at the office, where they get worn out by the way that he goes about the job, and so it feels like his time there is on the backside and probably nearing an end here. I certainly don't know, where he might be headed.
Kwani,
it's game time.
Game time.
So our first game is fill in the lane. I say a phrase, you fill in the blank for it. Our first one is, there's not enough talk about blank in this year's NBA Finals.
First of all, Kwani, I thought you said Blake, and I'm going, we got to talk about Blake Griffin?
No.
Why are we talking about him?
Very confused, yeah. There's not enough talk. Man, I mean, everything's getting talked about. I'm just going to say I personally can't talk about Monty Williams enough. I just like Paul's impact on this group has been well chronicled. I don't know, maybe kind of loop James Jones into that as well. James's decision to hire Monty, it's just the domino effect that unfolded with that group is the type of thing, I don't know what a parallel would be. I don't remember seeing something like this. Like, we had the young franchise player, but he was, bumping his head up against the ceiling because he didn't have help. But now we got the right coach, and the right coach, by the way, has a relationship with the right point guard who eventually comes to town. But Monty and his spirit, before Chris even got there, I mean, he legitimately changed the culture and raised the confidence in Devin and all those guys. And even the way, as an aside, like, Robert Sarver has long been known as just one of the worst owners in the NBA. Mm-hmm. And Monty took an approach with Robert that I certainly did not see coming at the time, where he talked about how, listen, I remember Monty told me this one time, you and I both have not been as good at our jobs as we would like to be. And it was kind of this very humanizing approach with Robert. He said, to a degree, we're in the same boat. So why don't we each other and do a better job this time around? Come to this, I didn't see this coming, but I think Monty's just got everything to do with where Phoenix is.
It's a good one. So now that NCAA athletes can get compensated, it would have been cool if Blank could have cashed out on his name, likeness, image when in college.
I got recency bias because we see him on TV all the time. But, like, I feel like Jalen Rose is the kind of guy that, like, would have just been swimming in his bag.
Gosh, that's a great
found a way
that is
to cash in back
then. That is a great answer.
And you could pick any of them. You got to stick with the five, though. We're not going down to, like, Rob Pelinka and, the bench warmers. But, yeah, I mean, Jalen, especially, it's probably I'm struck by the way that he's moved in his media career, where he, when kind of given that freedom to maximize his personality and his history, like, he's done that. So if a guy like that wasn't hindered, I think he probably would have made the most of it.
Yeah, that's a great one. Jalen would have probably wanted to be an owner at this point.
Yeah, he wouldn't even need to be in media.
So much money off in college, not before he got the NBA.
Right.
What else you got, Kwani?
All right, our final game is starting five. I'm going to give you a word or phrase, and you tell me the first thing that comes to mind when I say it. First one, Dallas Mavericks.
I knew that would make you laugh.
Come on now. I mean, we wrote the story. I don't want to be fake. So Bob Voulgaris is their, the head of their analytics department, that we chronicled how he had a lot more power in their front office than people realized. And he's still there. And it is what it is. Mark Cuban, who I get along well with, Mark decided to jump on Twitter and call the story total BS. And then 2 days later, the GM resigned, and 3 days later, the coach resigned, and felt pretty confident that we got the story right. So that's what comes to mind. But I mean, spinning it forward, we'll see how this group looks. Nico Harrison, coming from Nike, is a pretty outside the box, interesting pick to run the front office. It's the kind of parts of what they did are interesting and compelling, but we'll see. It's a tough couple years for the Mavs when it comes to the infrastructure and just the way they operate, obviously.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about them in the last few years. Ben Simmons.
Shoot, that's it. Someone's gonna make a lot of money, getting his confidence up, or maybe it'll never happen. But that's it. It's still a very good player that I think, might, if they end up moving him. I don't know if they will, by the way. Daryl Morey's not going to take peanuts for Ben Simmons, but he's somebody that could still help a ton of teams. The guy's young, all NBA, has one major hole in his game, but still does a bunch of stuff a whole lot better than a lot of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Paul.
Redemption, I guess. Even if they don't win the finals, it's just kind of reached the point where he's shown that in the right environment that, the kind of special player he is. And he can be a special leader. I'll be honest, I've been around him at times when the stuff you heard was not what you would qualify as impactful leadership. it was, he had to kind of find his way. And there was times when he didn't have a receptive audience with the players around him. So he's had highs and lows in that department, but it's a redemption story for him, because it's not just him having a good year, going vegan, playing well. It's way, way bigger than that. He's lifting up these young guys, investing in all of them as people in a kind of way that has got a lot to do with what they're doing.
Jay Crowder.
Underrated, I would say. He's not, no one's trying to say it's a Chris Paul type of impact, but Miami sure didn't look the same in certain departments without him. Right. And you see the impact here. I mean, Chris Paul and Devin, because Devin has shown that even though he hadn't been in the playoffs, he was capable of doing it. But like Jay, they needed another veteran. And he's just solid, you know what I mean? And you need a guy to guard the Kawhis and the LeBrons and the best wings in the game. And he gave them that for a lot of the year. And also, I don't know Jay well. You hear nothing but really good things. And I saw this adorable video clip today of him talking about his daughter and how after they won the West Finals, his daughter's like 7 years old. She already has a cell phone. And her friends had gotten Daddy's phone number, and they were all FaceTiming him to wish him well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he seems like a good guy. But, yeah, Jay's been kind of a glue guy for what they're doing.
Yeah. And finally, the Boston Celtics.
In flux, but not the type of, normally you hear in flux, it's like, turmoil. And, it's a change. It's a time for change. Brad Stevens is, I will say, jury's going to be out on, is he any good at that job? I think that's one thing to really look at, because he's coached his whole career. And I know he knows talent, but, Mike Zarin, as you guys know, is going to have a lot to do with the, transactional stuff and the relationships and making trade calls. And Mike's very, very good. So that part of the teamwork is going to be big. But, influx, I think, for me and the Celtics.
Well, that's it.
We got you all the way to the arena.
I feel like I should make it official. There's the arena. It's way over there.
Yes.
There we go. Sam Amick, thanks so much, buddy. Appreciate it.
All right, guys.
Be safe out there.
You. Appreciate you.
Yep. I'll see you, buddy.
That timing was impeccable.
That was fun.
What was your biggest takeaway from all of the
goodness. Sam, in full disclosure, Sam and I go back about 20 years. And we've always had good rapport, and he's just a really knowledgeable guy. I would say, kind of the stories about Udoka. Those stories I thought were really important because he was around him at a time when he was still kind of forming the basis for who he would become. And Sam had a chance to see him as a player. He saw him in his early stages as a coach. And Sam recognized, just that this guy at some point is someone that you need to be on the lookout for to be a head coach someday. And I thought that was really insightful and really important because, again, it's easy to jump on the Udoka bandwagon after he's been in a Popovich program. Then you go to Brooklyn where they've got the baddest big three that we've ever seen, or certainly among the best that we've ever seen. But there's so much more to him before he got to that point. And I thought Sam kind of shed a little bit of light on that with some of his stories, about the, kind of meeting folks for drinks. But I only got 27 minutes because I got to get back to video.
Yeah.
Those type of stories. I enjoyed that.
That's definitely the type of focus that any NBA coach should have, but especially one that really is starting this first new chapter of his life and also taking up a franchise that is so storied that is relying on him to succeed in that role.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what you got coming down the pipeline, Kwani A. Lunis?
Well, for now, we're still doing 10 questions with NBC 10 Boston. I may have another announcement soon, but stay tuned for that. Until then, head over to NBC10Boston.com/10 questions and catch all the, so far, we've done the political series, so to speak, of the Boston mayoral candidates. But now I'm shifting gears to the Olympics and trying to get more stories surrounding the local aspect of the Tokyo Olympics.
Okay. And
And I saw you wrote a great piece on Ebony Magazine, which is very relevant today.
Yeah. I had to chime in on the Maria Taylor, Rachel Nichols, ESPN kerfuffle that they're going through right now, and that's out there on ebony.com. Check that out. And I'll also still be doing some NBA Finals coverage for Bleacher Report, Boston Sports Journal, as well as my usual teaching over at BU. So I am staying active, engaged, and enthralled with this NBA Finals because I'm really excited to see these two teams at it because someone is getting a chip that very few people thought would at the end of the day. And I mean, I want Phoenix to be that team. That's the team that I'm pulling for. That's the team that I would like to see the last one standing. Lots of guys on that team I have a lot of respect for. I love what James Jones has done with that team in his GM role. I had a chance to talk to him a few weeks ago just about that team coming together. Great, really good guy. Won lots of chips with LeBron. Monty Williams is just one of those salt of the earth type of coaches. Has been through a lot and he's just a really good guy. So lots of good stuff going on with the finals this year. For Kwani A. Lunis, I'm Sherrod Blakely. This is another edition of the A-List podcast, and we will see you when we see you. We're out.